Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the reading. Here we go. We got about 20 minutes, and I need for y'all to hang with me, okay? Really bad. First thing I want to do is I want to give you a little tip about ministry. I've learned this the hard way. I've learned this by doing it wrong, which is how we learn everything. And if you don't think I'm right, just... When you're lay ministry, one of the things we learned last week was in empowering and enabling lay ministry. So here's a tip when you're dealing with people who need prayer, need encouragement, need help. And I want you to hear me. Let me say it like this. We know, and you know. And we know you know. And now you know that we know that you know. And so what we need is your prayers, desperately. What we need is encouragement. What we need is dinner. Thursday nights are good. I'm just being real. And what we need is space. We don't want to be abandoned, but we want things to be normal, and they're not. And we know, and you know, and we know that you know, and now you know that we know that you know, and we love you. Are we all good? Are we all where we need to be now? It's wonderful. It's wonderful. I called a friend this week, and I said, how you doing, man? He said, I have had the worst week. It's terrible. And I'm like, buddy, you know me. I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, and I can show you pain. I can have bigger pain than anybody when you're ready. And he said, well, I'll tell you my story first. And he did, and I told him mine. And he said, you win again. And I'm like, of course. I wouldn't lose. But it's a beautiful story. Don't get lost in the first part of it. I said, what happened to you, brother? He said, man, he's a worship leader in his church. He's a great guy. He's a great worship leader. And he has a call to preach. But, you know, he preaches when the pastor's not there, you know. And he said, I got a DUI on the way home from the club Friday night where my wife and I had gone out. And he said, and don't you know the rest, right? Sunday morning, the pastor's gone, and I'm scheduled to preach. And I got a DUI on Friday night, and I didn't know what to do. So he said, I called my pastor on Saturday, and I said, I got to be honest with you, and you might not want me to preach. And he told him, and he said, I don't want you to preach. You're going to preach the best sermon you've ever preached on Sunday. And he did. And what a beautiful thing that his church is standing beside him. I asked him one question, how are you and your wife? He said, man, do I realize how important that relationship is and how supportive she is. And I'm like, you good to go, baby. Everything else is just gravy. So we were at a conference this week in Dallas. It was supposed to be at this Presbyterian church in Fort Worth, but only 10 people signed up, so they moved it to the center in Dallas. And we had like intimate share time with some really amazing people. And I'm telling you that for a couple of reasons, and this is one. I have resisted teaching the Enneagram. Now, if some of y'all are phobic, and what I mean by that is phobic, say what you mean. If you're fear-filled and pictures bother you and YouTube videos scare you and you look to Wikipedia for truth, then you're not going to like any of this, okay? Because if you look it up, everybody says, ooh, is that a pentagram? And I'm like, man, do you not know what a pentagram looks like? Of course it's not a pentagram. It's not even a 5-pointed star, but it is, it's a diagram. Yeah, it is a pattern for understanding ourselves. If you're one of those people who hates being pigeonholed and you don't want to be labeled, then you're not going to like it. Don't come. I'll try not to talk about it on Sundays so it won't bother you. If you're in the first half of life, you have not dealt with your pain, you refuse to deal with your pain, I think you could get something out of it, but it'll probably be something you need to store away for later years when your happens. I'm getting better. I didn't say it into the mic. For those of you who thought that was vulgar, you've not been through yours yet. I've resisted teaching the Enneagram because I didn't want it to just be a tool. I just wanted it to be, oh gosh, we came and Pastor Doug and Richard Rohr and Suzanne Stabile and all these people taught us all these things about ourselves which we don't want to know, we don't believe, we deny anyway. And why would I teach you something like that? And then I go to this silly conference where I got set up one day at a time. I was in the bestest place I could have been. If you've had any pain in your life, I'll tell you, my wife and I and our relationship together moved forward eons this week in the middle of tragedy and suffering. It's just, I now know why you want me to teach it. I now know why I want to teach it. I now know what it can do to liberate you and free you. I know what to tell you not to let it do, and I won't let you do that. I promise. But I really encourage you to come. Sunday nights. It'll start in September at 6:30. This thing is thousands of years old. Come on. Now, I'm going to move on from that. Another thing we had a chance to do this week was to talk about things that make us impassioned. And so I got this thing some of y'all have heard about. It's called Red Dirt Disciple. And I talked with several people who are like on a national stage this week, including Brian McLaren, who just really got excited about this thing. But Red Dirt Disciple started out like we have a praise band here, and the praise band likes to go out and play other places. And so we would go out and play at parks, and we'd go out and play at other churches, and we started thinking, wow, how do we take this to another level? And how do we really make this a manifestation of church that we share with one another? And so we came up with this idea, Red Dirt Disciple. Red Dirt Disciple. When we go visit people, that's one-on-one, grassroots, organic, right there at that level. People with people, right? We go out and we play. Usually people cook or have a potluck dinner. Sometimes they take up a love offering. That's not the most important part of what we do. It's just being with people. And then while this is going on, they're telling me that in our denomination and in our area and in our region and in our general level, that when we hold assemblies, people are coming in less and less and less, fewer numbers, okay? And so it just hits me, well, you got to start taking church to people again, you know? People in Mineral Wells or people in Fort Worth may not always want to drive to Midland, and people in Midland may not always drive to Dallas. We got to start again, like where we came from, camp meetings. You know, people of all different denominations would gather and share this scandalous meal at the Lord's table amongst different denominations, and it would just take people way out of their comfort zones. And here they go. And so what about that in a new day? What does that look like? So we came up with the idea of Red Dirt Disciple. And then we started building these festivals in our mind. And we're going to build them on the ground too. Just wait. Right now it's in our minds. But what if we visited all these places and all of these people came from places that we visited to a location, not driving from Fort Worth to Midland, but maybe from Jacksboro to Mineral Wells, maybe from Stephenville to Mineral Wells, maybe from Big Spring to Midland, and we just got all these people together, and this was born out of this idea. You know, we just had our General Assembly in Florida. Big deal. Finally, our denomination is making statements on key hot button issues in the church. For whatever reason, I was told, well, it's so we can get a general consensus of how we feel. My question was, if we're going to get a general consensus of how we feel, why do we keep gathering 3 to 5% of disciples who have affluence and wealth enough to get to Florida, sustain themselves for a week, open their mouths and vote? I'm not being harsh. I think it's a good thing, but I don't think it's a general consensus. And besides that, in a denomination where polity is in your seat, you decide. If you don't like the pastor next week, talk to your board, you get rid of him. You decide. You don't get forced to send money to the general level. You send it because you are in covenant to live with folks at the general level. So they can say anything, we can say anything we want at the general level, but it doesn't bind you. But what about a way to get disciples together, get people together where you don't have to have a week off work, and you don't have to have enough money to buy a plane ticket or fuel to get to Florida or Portland or Kansas City. You don't have to have a hotel for a week. How would we do that? And then I'm telling these people about, my idea for Red Dirt Disciple, which is all about me, by the way. In case you haven't noticed, I like to camp. I like to travel. I like to sing. I like to play guitar. I like to be opinionated. I like to win. And so, you see, it's all about me. And then my wife started telling this vision at the table. And I never saw her do this before, but she started crying while she was talking about it. And I can't tell it like her, so I'm going to ask her, come up here and tell them what you had. I'm just singing. I'm just going, look at me. And Shannon says this.
I said, what if we really can do this thing? And we get maybe first 1,000 people come, and then 5,000, and then maybe this thing grows into 20,000 people. But on that smaller level, what if we have all these people coming here, and we are able to... The people who are going to try to build this thing, what if we were able to reach out and get dental vans, get Goodwill to come out with truckloads of stuff, get medical vehicles out there, tell everybody, bring food to share with somebody else, just bring stuff, and bring something to give away. A deck of cards, a bag of pennies, just give people things. And when you get here, instead of paying to get in, you have to take something from us and then go find somebody to give it to. And just build this whole, the things that people really need. And I can see, this 1-2 day event going on and teams of people going, oh, wow, there's 10 of us standing here who know how to use a hammer. Why don't we go into that town and let's go surprise somebody and fix some shutters or, do some repairs and fix some cars. I mean, this may sound just absolutely insane to some of y'all, but I'm insane at this point. And I'm thinking we need to do this radically.
Pretty insane. It's kind of like this crazy, crazy day when Jesus is walking along the seashore and he sees two of his friends. There's Peter and there's Andrew. They've been talking and they know who he is, and they've got this thing in their mind that, he's going to ask us and we've got to make a decision. He's going to come by one day and he's going to say, now, immediately, and we're going to have to make a decision. In some readings, it looks like they just looked up and went, oh, the Lord. And they followed him. Has that ever happened to you? I didn't think so. Didn't happen to them that way either, but you got to know that when he said, let's go, choirs of angels sang, trumpets blared, you lost your breath for just a minute, and then you got to make a decision. You going? You in? Coming along? And he walks a little way further, and he sees, if Peter and Andrew aren't enough, he sees the sons of Zebedee, whose father has enough of temper, probably run them all out of town. And he says, let's go. Immediately. And they've got to leave their father. It's probably pretty stern. You don't get a name like Thunder without being. They didn't just leave their dad. They left their families. They didn't just leave their families. They left their boats and their nets. Do you know what they left? They left everything. Their income. Their way of supporting themselves. They left the family business. If you've ever owned a business, it's not like quitting a job when you take a week off. You don't know if you've got anything to come back to at the end of the week. They left everything. They left their comfort zone. The call of the gospel, Richard Rohr says, calls you into crisis because it calls you out of your comfort zone. And the word crisis is the word in the Greek that we interpret judgment. Calls your life into judgment, right out of your comfort zone. I wonder, has God, has Jesus, has the gospel ever called you out of your comfort zone? If I said, raise your hand, would you? Would you tell me? Yes, I've been out. If I said, tell me your story. And what would that look like? Well, I don't really like talking, and so, but I was called to share the gospel by talking to someone at work. That could be outside your comfort zone. I wanted people to know I went to church, but not that church. That could be outside your comfort zone. For some people, just daring to believe it all, because for years many of us have took this position that religion is bad and the church is bad, and now at this point in my life to take a step in that direction and say, I'm going to put faith in what I have criticized could be outside your comfort zone. But that's really not what I'm talking about. That's nothing like leaving your boats and your nets behind. That's nothing like leaving your family. That is nothing like that at all. There's this story that Jesus uses, or an illustration really, in his one great sermon. Some scholars say Jesus may have only had one great sermon. But you've read it. It's in Luke, but it's really in Matthew. 3 big chapters there. Jesus is on a hillside where people can hear, and he's teaching and preaching to thousands of people. And you've got portions of that sermon embedded in your theology and in your memory. You know, the turn the other cheek stuff, and you've heard it said, but I say, and all of those lines. And then in the middle of that, Jesus says this thing that Tony Salisbury used to preach a sermon around, the second mile Christian. You know, the one that'll go further than what is required. Jesus says, when someone implores you to go with them a mile, carry it the second mile. You know where that comes from? I mean, it sounds good in the sermon, but I want you to hear what Jesus is talking about. He's not talking about my neighbor who I love and who doesn't have a car, and my neighbor who's poor and needs a ride to the hospital, and so I went. But as a second mile Christian, I stayed and gave the poor person a ride home. That's not it. It's harsher than that. In Jesus' day, the Hebrew people, the Jews, you know, are living under occupation. It's like the Romans moved into our neighborhood here. And anytime you go to the post office, anytime you go to the bank, anytime you go to the grocery store, you have to walk past armed sentries, guards, soldiers, who know that there's this law that says that if they're tired and to conserve their energy, one of the things they are allowed to do under the rules of war, the Geneva Convention, however you want to look at it, they can grab you and they can say, carry my pack a mile. That's legal. What the law's in place for is so that they cannot implore you to go any further than a mile. It's a remnant of compassion for the slave, and in a non-corrupt world, which there may not be, that law would be honored. But I'm sure in Jesus' day, people were saying, you know that law, Jesus, where it says that we can be implored to carry a Roman sentry's pack for a mile? Do you know that some of them, did you know, Jesus, that some of them are going beyond that rule, and that they are taxing our people and breaking us? They're forcing us to carry, and they're waiting for Jesus, the liberator. Did you know that that's what the whole Christ thing means? The liberator, the one who frees us. And he frees them like this. He says, then when they implore you to carry it a mile, just sign up for 2. Carry it 2 miles. Start there. Now that is outside your comfort zone. That's a little bit more difficult than timidly opening your mouth at work to say, yes, I go to church. I wonder why we don't do it. You know, there are rules in place for everything. And we as Christians should honor the rules. The Apostle Paul covered that very thoroughly. You pay the correct amount of commitment, dedication, and respect and honor to the civic authorities. Don't go around breaking the laws. But how many times as a Christian do you know that something's broken? And you say, well, I followed the rules. I did it right. From this point on, it's all on that person. It's all on that entity. It's all on that system. I did what anyone else would have done. I wonder if those were the people Jesus said, well, then don't do what anyone else would do. Do twice that much. We are called by the gospel to step outside of our comfort zones and to do it in faith. One of the reasons I believe that we don't do it is because at the end of the day, we say to God, God, I know your kingdom looks good, but it'll never work here. God, in a perfect world, we could turn the other cheek, and in a perfect world, we could forgive and we could love, but God, this is not a perfect world, and if we were to lay down like that, other nations, other peoples would come not only from my neighborhood, but across borders and across the skies, and before long we would just be sitting ducks for a hungry world. That is what we believe. That is the altar at which we worship. That is the fear that controls us and keeps us pinned down. And God is calling people every day to get outside their comfort zones. And you don't have to sign up and fly in an airplane to Africa and witness to people in the darkest part of the jungle. You don't have to go to South America and build huts. If that's what you do, do that. We should support that, but not everybody is called to that. It begins like this. There are people in their homes, their husbands and wives who are being called outside their comfort zone because you're right, you've been wronged, and you know it, and God is calling you outside yourself. Empty yourself, Jesus is saying. Why is it that most of all of Jesus' teachings are either about releasing ourselves from materialism, from fear, or from violence? And violence pervades our homes. I can tell you what causes all of the divorces, and it's not money, it's violence. It's anger. It's I was right and nobody walks on me. And you know, it's awfully uncomfortable to let go of that. There are parents today being called outside their comfort zones because they want to throw their hands up and walk out. Because children are wrong sometimes, and because they step outside the lines. But you know, there's that second mile when you just give it to God and you say, I'm gonna believe it. I'm gonna go on faith because I don't think that this is how it works, but I'm gonna try it. And parents are being called to empty themselves. I can keep going. Shannon's vision of medical and dental clinics for the poor. I don't like being political, but I saw a person on TV telling me to conserve water. And he sits on one of the most powerful boards in town. And I'm like, I'll turn my water hose off when you start giving equal health care to all the people that come to your facility. No more 14-hour waits at the trauma center. And you can say, well, I've done it. I've done everything that the system says, and this person fell outside this line. Go the next mile. Get outside your comfort zones. If you are a teacher, an administrator, there is a way to teach in the classroom, and the rules are there, and you can do it by the rules, and at the end of the day, you can look up and say, there's 3 or 4 kids in my class who are they're not getting it. They don't, but I've done everything the protocol says. Well, then do what the protocol says. Protect your job. Do it the way you're called to do it, and then go the second mile. Everybody ain't the same. A poor person ain't just a poor person. An inattentive student ain't just an inattentive student. And sometimes a wayward spouse or a rebellious teen are not just that. Everybody got here somehow. Now, if that's none of your business, then you can quit anytime. And let me tell you what doesn't happen. You don't go to hell. You might live in hell around here with the rest of us, but you don't go to hell for that. God does not abandon you. God does not go, well, I knocked and you never said yes. That's not the way it works. When you have had enough of this Jesus stuff, you can say, hey, Christ, I'm out. And Jesus will do exactly what he did for the rich young ruler. He will look and he will love you. And he will say to those around him, don't worry about it. I got that one. But to compel you and impel you into this kind of self-sacrificing life, no. The problem is, though, when you get a little taste of it, you start to see, oh, wait a minute. The kingdom of God is real. And it's not about me. I heard this, the harshest thing I've heard in a long time, and it was said by Richard Rohr, and he didn't say it to me, so I can pretend like he didn't say it. But Suzanne Stabile said this week. She said, when you are discerning your call to the gospel, and the gospel's call on you, and you ask this question, how will this affect my life? You can no longer discern the call. You just lost it. You got to stop, clear, start all over again. Because, and she said, Richard told her this himself, because it is none of your business what God is doing with your life. That's hard. Well, I've given you an out. You can always say, well, time out, God. Not going there. And I'm telling you, God will stay right where you are. I've said it to you. You want to stay stuck in the mud? Stay stuck in the mud. God will never abandon you. God will stay stuck in the mud with you. But God's not like being stuck in the mud, I don't think. It's a call outside our comfort zones. And I don't know what it looks like for you. I'm pretty sure I know what some of it looks like for me today. And it is uncomfortable. But whatever it looks like for you, I'm pretty sure you'll know too. I'm betting you won't need a whole lot of help recognizing it. Second mile. We can change this thing, baby. It'll really work. Peace is possible. It can happen. If it can't happen anywhere else, I'll tell you a great place to start. Right here. Inside these walls, we're all safe. We got to leave. Hopefully in a few minutes. If I get quiet, we sing, eat some bread, drink a little juice, we're out of here. But I hope you'll come back. I hope you'll come back next week. I hope you'll come to the fellowships. I hope you'll come to the studies, because it's through the disciplines that you get this. It's through centering. It's through being quiet. It's through praying. It's not just coming to church on Sunday morning and, wow, that guy said some pretty amazing things. No, what are you going to do? Take them into prayer with you. Take them into Bible study with you. Take them into fellowship with you. Take them into the conflict with you. Keep sitting with it. Keep sitting with it, because we can at least practice here. A place where we are willing to say, well, that was a new idea. I never heard it before. Sort of challenges what I've always believed. I'm going to sit on it for a while. You're beautiful people. I'm going to give you that as I close. You're beautiful people. I've been watching you. And you're going through it. And it hurts. And you have no idea what God is doing with it. If you did, you'd screw it up. So therefore, it's really not your business. But I'm going to tell you what's your business. The blessing. It comes. Oh, it comes. It comes. All thanks be to God today and every day. Will you pray with me?